I hope you guys are staying positive, keeping that positive energy flowing. As you know, that's how we stay grounded. Today, I want to give you guys a lesson on soldering a simple circuit. As you can see here, we're going to use my Hello LED light circuit that is connected to this simple passive resistor switch and power supply circuit. It already came with solder lead connecting all of these components together. So I said, hey, let's desolder this, take it apart, and put it together so I can give you guys a little one-on-one tips of how I use solder lead to solder a circuit like so. If you can see closely here, the switch, the resistor, and those wires are soldered together. So it's only about 4 parts. So this shouldn't be so complicated. I like to do fun little projects like this. So yeah, y'all, that's the connection. Let's just go ahead and show you guys how to use a soldering iron. So for the first lesson of desoldering, which is melting the solder lead and suctioning it up, you will need 2 tools, which is your soldering iron set to 450 degrees, and then also the suction tool, which is, I call it a desolder suction tip. Not sure for the exact word, but you can find this with a soldering kit that I will leave the link in the section below. So I don't have a steady hand, as you can see from this first take. I find it hard to kind of get it steady. But if you just hold the iron close to where the lead is, you will be able to melt it. And then once you see that the solder lead has been melted, you will go ahead and pull down on the suction part of the desolder, and it will basically suction up the lead at where you pointed at, which is why the cause for the shakiness when I release. It's totally fun, and it gets away all of the nerves once you get used to it. But you just gotta take that first step and try it out. So this part is the easiest because there is less surrounding the area. And here I am showing you how the wire is now disconnected and loose. This next part will be next to where the switch is and the resistor and the wire connection. Here I don't have such a close-up, but you guys can see how steady you have to be and how close you should have your soldering and suction tool. You'll also be able to see me pull down and release on the tool and see the massive effect it has. I'm a pretty quick gal with this kind of stuff, so I hope you guys can follow along with this video. If so, leave a comment below and I can answer the question. So now that we have taken apart that entire circuit, I just went ahead and laid out all of those components to the side so that we can fit it back into the circuit and re-engineer what we just desoldered and solder it again. So I'm pulling out my soldering lead, and I'm basically going to pull out a little bit from this cylinder container that I house the lead in. It's in a spiral cylinder. That way I can just pull it out conveniently. I typically take the tip of that and warm it up and kind of just push down and add more solder lead to wherever I'm heating up, or my point of heat. Once that's done, I basically just hold it there for a few seconds until the soldering lead has dried up, because it has a liquid state for at least 2 seconds. If you hold it there for at least 3 seconds, it's sure to stay. You just have to make sure you have it formed in the manner that you want the connectors to connect. I hope you guys are still watching. I have another good tip for soldering. When soldering two components together, you typically want to add solder onto one component and then add solder onto the other component. And then once you have solder on both components, then you can attach them at said point, like so in the video. I'm basically attaching both parts now since they both have solder on it, and I'm melting them together so that it's kind of easier. Getting two components to be still at the same time is a little more difficult than what you think. So a good tip would be to add solder to both parts and then melt the solder so that they're both connected, right? So halfway through this video, I noticed that I didn't mention that you should keep a wet sponge, and not wet as in like soaked sponge, but it should be damp to where the sponge can wipe off any excess solder that is on the point of the soldering iron. I typically like to do this when I'm starting on new points, new sections of a circuit, just so that it can be clean. Some of the solder typically burns, and as you can see here, it goes back to a nice aluminum finish once you wipe it off with the wet sponge. So again, you guys can see this other trick, well, the same trick of me adding solder onto one component. I just melt the solder, let it glob up a little bit. It's already moving, giving me a little tough time, but that's okay. And then I take that part and I'm trying to angle myself to where I can place it in a nice manner. So a lot of this is patience and trial and basically fitting a puzzle piece into the puzzle of the circuit. the technique of using solder lead on a simple circuit, let's step over and see the technique of using solder paste onto a massive printed circuit board, well, advanced printed circuit board. For the advanced printed circuit board, we will be masking it over the central processing unit, where I will basically line it across the chips that are printed across the board, and then flatten it with a copper clad board that is matched to the heat sink. This here will in turn melt the solder paste so that it can have the same effect that solder lead has on a simple circuit, as well as this advanced circuit board. So those are the tips and tricks you guys have learned today for how to solder, how to desolder, and how to use solder lead versus solder paste. Thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe this video.